Hello, dear audience. We are going to continue our conversations on Feast of Healthy Thoughts, and we are going to continue also the conversations that we have started on Mother Teresa's prayer or business card that she created for a friend. I want to remind you about the prayer. I want to remind you what the prayer was, reading it. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. The fruit of service is peace. In addition to this, we have discovered other parts. The first line, the first sentence before it starts talking about the fruits of different gifts, is that sacrifice to be real must hurt, must cost. We must empty ourselves. It gives the whole meaning to the prayer. It unfolds many layers that in order to understand all these gifts, we have to be ready to empty ourselves, to give us completely, to sacrifice everything that we have to be real. But now we also have other parts of the prayer that we discovered recently through our research, and this adds new lines or new additions to each line. I'm going to read the whole thing again with those additions. The fruit of silence is prayer. Teach us to pray. The fruit of prayer is faith. Help us to believe. The fruit of faith is love. Guide us to love. The fruit of love is service. Strengthen us to serve. The fruit of service is peace. Lead us to peace. Now I think that Mother Teresa, creating this prayer, added those additions to warn us that it's not us who does these things, even though we are the tool or the object. It's done through God, only with God, with the help of God. And for herself, she probably felt in her own experience that everything that she did could not be done if God was not present or next to her or helping her or blessing her. So today we're going to speak about the last two lines of the prayer. The fruit of love is service, and the fruit of service is peace. And for this reason, we're going to speak with Dr. Kiyaki, ask her questions. Let's start with the line, the fruit of love is service. We have spoken about love many times before. I would like you to start with that, maybe, to speak about love again, to make it clear for our audience what love is. In the daily life, in society, there are many understandings of love. Now, when I was coming to the studio, I was thinking about this, and I remembered that the first time when I fell in love, this was completely different love, I think, that what Mother Teresa is talking about. But it gave me so much strength. And later on, when I looked back and I realized that things that I have done under that force, I couldn't have done if I wasn't doing because of it. She talks about the love of the human being, love of God, and what would your comments be? What kind of love is this? What is she talking about?
Well, even with the love that you talked about when you were a teenager, and I think of all the romantic songs that talk about falling in love when you're a teenager, one of the expressions, maybe you know this, is to refer to that kind of love as puppy love. And there's some sweet, goofy songs that go back many years that talk about love being puppy love. But you know, if any real love is real love, even puppy love can be good. And when you look back at your first experiences as an adolescent young person, that you did things that were kind of extraordinary for the sake of love. I have a feeling, just the way you talked about it, that God was in that too. So even when we love someone, or we do something in love, even when we're not quite mature, even when it's not perfect, even when we really aren't mature yet to sort of reach out to the loving other, meaning God himself, when there's a sincerity in that love, when there's a selflessness, when it's unselfish, even a puppy love, it can be good, and God works with that, and wonderful things can happen. So the part that says the fruit of love is service, and then the corresponding of that is strengthen us to serve. Even with puppy love, when we offer that sincerely, God strengthens that in a good way. And so, as you said, with puppy love, you were able to do things, looking in hindsight, you would not have been able to do as a young adolescent without that power. It's a power that somehow comes beyond us or through us to do these wonderful things. On my little planet, when I think of what is love, first response for me is that it's self-sacrificial. It is sacrificial. When I am loved, or when love is given to me, extended to me, for me, my first response is to give the love back. It is to somehow make the circle complete. And so Mother Teresa says the fruit of love is service, and not the fruit of love is more love. Is on the surface a little bit of a downer. Service doesn't always ring true when the work takes on a life of its own and can sometimes take us away from authentic love. So that she says that the fruit of love is service as opposed to more love. Well, obviously she's been around the block more than I have. She has something in mind that I don't quite get. As an Orthodox, when I think about that, when authentic love is given to us, the response is to respond in kind with more love. Well, that points us to a kind of dance, a dance of love, where there's a circle going on between the one experiencing the love and the beloved other. As Christians, we believe that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and a God who is a community of three, where one and one and one equals one. And they abide in a dance of love, where one loves the other, leaps into the arms, if I can say, use human language, of the other, and is received and not destroyed, and finds oneself in the love of the other. These are poor human words to talk about what we call the perichoresis of God, the mutual loving interpenetration, the kind of dance where they are in one another, loving one another, are presently themselves, and yet still one in a way we don't understand. And yet, as humans created in this image and likeness of God, we too are called to this dance. A, with the God who created us, and B, with one another, and C, with all of creation. And so all of this is happening. And when we look at the scriptures with these eyes, we see even from the very beginning of New Covenant that the Lord himself, the second person of the Trinity, emptied himself, ekenosen eofton, which we have talked about in the past, in other episodes, where in his love for us, more than rescued, but to bring back creation, especially humanity, back into the loving communion with God the Father, the second person of the Trinity becomes human in a way that where there's a sacrifice, we still don't understand what that meant for God to become human even today. But the Greek expression ekenosen eofton literally means he emptied himself, but to the point of being gutted, if I can say pain, in a way that we don't understand, but there's a kind of sacrifice that God himself has given. When we reflect more on this, what does this mean when Jesus was with us in his human ministry? What are one of the teachings that reverberate through time to this moment is he repeats to us that I have come among you as one who serves. So he is the personification of love. And that rather than being served, he serves. Rather than being worshipped, he adores us through love. He lavishes us with his love. What does that mean for us regarding service? Well, if God reaches out in love for us, if God changes his very life for us in love, gives life to others in a way that's paradoxical and turns upside down on its head the fallen human understandings of power, the fallen human understandings of authority, in the sense that the leader should not be touched and should be served, okay? As opposed to the leader serving and girding himself and literally wiping the feet of those he's serving. We have that story of Jesus washing the feet of his own disciples, is a picture for us of what it means for us to love as well, that we too are called to deeply listen and do likewise. The Lord's greatest commandment is that we should love our God with our whole heart, soul, and mind, and our neighbor as ourselves. This personifies all that God has done for us and desires for us and from us, so that this love circle can be better completed. Now, we're human, we're fallen, we're still finite, so we do the best we can, and we surrender to that, and then God fulfills the rest. And so I think this is sort of the paradox we might also be talking about as we continue our discussion. And so I'll start with a warning that when we talk about the fruit of love is service, you and I need to remind ourselves that if we love, if we feel that impulse to love another or others, we have to listen deeply to what that means. sometimes that impulse is just being impulsive.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes that impulse leads us to do something spontaneous that takes us beyond ourselves. So there's a kind of intermediate link between the love and the service, and that is deep listening in the presence of God. What is it that I'm called to do in response to this love? Because if I respond too suddenly without thinking it through, then it is impulsive, and I might be doing a disservice to the situation. Or if I'm listening deeply in a way that's authentic to the situation and myself in the presence of God, then how I respond to the other, even if it's spontaneous, is life-giving in ways no one in the room at that moment would have known. Mm-hmm. So I think there's that extra ingredient that I would add of deeply listening in the presence of God. And that could take just a minute, or it could take a year or longer to discern how one goes forward in service to the other.
A few years ago, I tried to show it in my life that I can work day and night. I can do things, I can make things happen. Sometimes I took away from my sleep, sometimes I didn't pay attention when I was at work, I did things in my mind. And it came to a point where I got sick, really sick, to a point where I couldn't do anything anymore. And there were two different approaches to this. Some people suggested me that what I was doing without love, without loving it. Otherwise, doesn't matter how much I do, I would never get sick. And some people say, well, you just did too much, you shouldn't have done that much.
Both of those don't feel good. People, God bless whoever said that to you, that you didn't have enough love. Did the person love you? Don't answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
Did the person love you who said this? Did the person have the wisdom and the maturity to be able to speak to your inner disposition of loving? Maybe the person did. But even if the person did, the feeling I'm getting from the way you're talking about, giving a real example, is like a blanket trying to quench the good in me, the way you said that.
I think there is different ways of understanding of love. Love as a power on itself that gives us strength or makes us able to serve. Mm-hmm. And love as a result of God's presence that helps us to do things. This Russian theologian explains that Christ spoke about God very, very little in the New Testament in comparison to how much he spoke about himself. And his understanding and explanation was that he concentrates human mind to himself. He is important, and then everything else comes. Now there is another understanding that love is the most important, and love is what gives us strength. I have heard this example that during World War II, a child fell under a tank, and a mother went and moved the tank to take out the child.
I've heard similar stories of mothers moving cars,
yes.
trucks.
Yes.
So
here we can say it's the love that gives the strength and concentrate on our own person, or we can say that God helped that child. A miracle happened.
With the mother who, for the sake of love for her child, moves a truck, or moves a car, or moves a van, or moves a tank. Did the love in her somehow quickly move a lot of chemicals in her own body to give her more human strength that most humans don't have in a daily way? Did her focus on moving the object, some people would even say in a metaphysical way, was it mind over matter? They may not have a sense of the divine, but they would just say mind over matter and unseen electrical level. As an Orthodox Christian, all of that can happen as a result of the love of God. So emergencies happen, unexpected, spontaneous things happen when we know clearly that this is what we have to do, and we take that kind of a risk. But I'm also sad about when you're saying the story of you started a project. How many of us may have started projects? I've started a few projects in my day that may or may not have sprouted. But if they were based in authentic love, if there was a sincere alignment between my desire and doing something good, on planet Kiryaki, there's always some good that comes from that, even if we don't see fruit right away. And so when I look back on all the major projects I've started, some that I'm still struggling with, some that were put out and laid to rest immediately. And so this is a little bit of the hint that story you said to me, that you try to do something and you put a lot of effort into it, and then somehow some powers that be somehow put a wet blanket over it, kind of, cooled everything down to the point of near death. And I'm saying, okay, in the presence of God, none of that is really wasted. We can learn from that. That's a sacrifice. That is part of the sacrifice of love we make, that we don't know what those sparks do. We don't know what that witness does. We don't know how that changes us in a way that maybe 2 minutes, 2 years, 20 years, 40 years down the pike, that has grown seeds and become something wonderful that helps us in the long run in ways we didn't expect till we learn that maybe many decades later. And so all of this, when it's for the sake of love and it's authentic, it's never lost. But it is a crucifixion. It is an experience of death. And for her to say the fruit of love is service is a real paradox, because service hurts. Service makes us take risks. Service changes us in some way when it's done authentically. We're never the same. We don't look the same on the other side. We might not act the same. And hopefully we've grown from that. And hopefully that we've grown in more love despite the pain that comes with service.
Now, the service is service, and love is love, and God strengthens us, but there is still that one gray area where a human being has limited abilities, can do only so much. After that, the person can get burned out and be no good anymore.
That's why I added that extra step between love and service, is to listen deeply, deep listening, and that can take a minute, or that can take a year, but to discern how does one proceed to express their love in service to God and other. And yes, we are human, we will make mistakes over and over again, but to try to learn from those mistakes and know that the burnout that happens with clergy and people in ministry and good people who are trying to do good with their lives and to offer something that is altruistic, that is truly, there's no strings attached, that their concern for the other is out of respect and love for the other. It takes energy. It is energizing at some points because it's true for us. We are aligned with our commitments in the presence of God and what's true for us. And because it expends energy from us, it does take some of our life's energy away. And many people, in fact, I don't know of one person who does this kind of work that doesn't go into this murky gray area of risking burnout, risking brownout. And we have to remember, even from the creation story, God the Father rested on the seventh day. Well, did God really need to rest? But that is saying something about God's relationship with us, with creation, with who He is in a way we don't understand, but it points to something about Him. But we are created in that same image and after that same likeness. And so that means we too need to schedule recreation and rest in a way that helps us restore our batteries. There may be a time when we do have to sprint and we have to run a race very, very hard for a while in our lives. At the same time, we do have to return back to a kind of cyclical, predictable, restorative pattern that will help us with our inner batteries getting recharged. I do want to say, though, one of the things that we've talked about in the past in our time together is how when we offer ourselves, it is our call to do that. But we all have a particular cross to bear. And so one of my newer prayers is, Lord, help me hang on the right cross, not to sacrifice myself on the wrong crosses. Maybe I might have been a good police officer, or I might have been a good science teacher, but if I had followed either of those paths, it might not have been the path that was right for me. I look back at my life now, and 60 to 70% of the time, more like 60% of the time, I say, I think I made the right choices to be here where I am, wherever that is, because I don't know where I am. But the issue is to hang on the right cross. At least to this moment, it feels like I'm on the path that's leading to the right cross I'm supposed to hang on. Because when we're on that path, all of us, there's going to be time for joy, there's going to be time for sadness, there'll be time for difficulties, but there'll be time for restoration, recreation, enjoyment, laughter, because the Lord also did that as He lived on earth, that He appreciated and tasted the fruit of the vine and gave glory to God for the being incarnate as a human being. It is good to be in matter. Matter matters. We talked about this in the past a while ago. And so someday we will hang on a cross where we don't get off of. For example, Mother Teresa, of blessed memory, gave her life to the very end to the people she was ministering. She hung on the right cross. And I might add something, changing the subject a little bit. You talked about some clergy. I was going to interrupt you and say, were you talking about Roman Catholic clergy, Protestant clergy, or Orthodox clergy? Because as an Orthodox Christian, we're both Orthodox, I am going to hang some dirty laundry out here. I hung it before, but just in case people missed those and are listening to this for the first time, that I'm embarrassed as an Orthodox, that there are some Orthodox in leadership positions, and even recently, when I was telling a friend of mine who's a theologian that I love and respect deeply, and he's a good person, good man, very good man. And when I said that we were doing, in fact, I was saying, I'd like to give you a copy of one of our discussions because we go places I don't expect we're going to go. And another episode. And he took the other episode. He didn't want the episode with Mother Teresa. And I'm thinking, too bad, you lose. I mean, I would have given him both. I wanted to give him both, but he didn't want the one. And so this is a bias that we have as Orthodox, that, gee, some good person doing good in the name of the Lord and not saying anything that as an Orthodox rings untrue to us, generally speaking. I've not read all her work, but from what I've seen, doesn't say anything that as an Orthodox we would be uncomfortable with, that some people from our own family just look the other way. And I'm thinking, you're losing. And so I'm very grateful that we've had this time to discuss and to reflect on her witness, because she's challenging and inviting all of us.
When you were talking about hanging on the right cross and questioning your own life, have I done the right thing or not, it reminded me an episode from the movie that is based on Mother Teresa's life. And at one point, at the end of her life, the last years of her life, when her service was blossoming, despite her efforts, she was like watching from a side how it's blossoming. But there were things that were happening that she didn't want to happen, or didn't want to go that direction. She started questioning herself. One morning, very early, she wakes up and goes to the river. She sits there until the sunrise. And she thinks, and very much upset, thinking that she hasn't done the right thing. Maybe she should have done something else because it's not going the direction that she wants, or she thinks that God wants. And then she walks back through the empty streets of Calcutta to the hospital. And all of a sudden she notices this extremely poor person, a sick person, laying on the street and can barely move. And then she looks at him and he opens his eyes and says, "What's troubling you, my daughter?" And it was very unusual. Usually she's the one who helps. And she says, "Well, I don't know if I've done the right thing." And this man says, "Remember one thing, that God never abandons his faithful servants." And Mother Teresa kind of gets shocked that she's getting an answer to her questions from this poor person on the street. And then she turns around and he wasn't there anymore. And she walks running almost to the hospital to continue her work. There are many other opinions about her changing her mind at the end of her life, or being not very sure whether she did the right thing or not. But we see the results. They say now there are 600 countries where her nuns are working. Christ calls his disciples and says, "I'm serving you, and you go and serve the same way." And what he does is washing their feet. People serve in different fields. Before we have spoken about the police officers, that every time they get out of the car to pull over somebody, they know that they can be shot, but they still keep serving. This is another type of service. What do you think about this? What kind of work is considered as a service?
Everything done in the name of God, based in love, can be a service. But I'd like to take a little bit of another tactic right now as you say this, because as you were talking, you brought to mind two people that I love very much. One, Metropolitan John Zizioulas, who is a very highly respected Orthodox theologian who has written numerous works on the issue of what it means to be a human being, what it means to be Christian, what it means to be a member of the Church Catholic. And his first and arguably most famous book, because he's written a few more books since then that are now about as equally famous, is called Being as Communion. And so oftentimes we think of service and what we do as who we are. So our jobs, homemaker, police officer, teacher, identify who we are. And for a great number of people across the world, that is still the label and the way we identify one another, as what we do is what we are. And through his work and many other theologians, many good theologians, and of many other good people that have also cultivated this discernment, that in order for us to become ourselves, that unique who we are in the presence of God, it is in community with others, in communion with others. And so the service somehow serves communion, serves relationship. It is never outside, it is never an act of itself. When it's just an act of itself, where there's no love, when it becomes an end in itself, then it becomes an idol. That's why work addiction is an idolatry. So all service, all outreach has to somehow be expressive of relationship, in service to relationship with the other, with creation, with God himself. That's the first point. So Metropolitan John would talk about being as communion, that we become ourselves through relationship with the other. And then there's a little joke when I talk about this in my class, and you've heard this joke, and I'm going to say it now in the program. So there was this graffiti, this is the joke, the graffiti on a wall that was found by archaeologists not too long ago that talked about philosophy in a nutshell. And so it said in Greek, Socrates, ... To be is to do. The next line is Aristotle, ... To do is to be. Third line, Sinatra, doobie doobie do. Okay, so getting back to the next point I wanted to say, that who we are in the presence of God, identity, is at the foundation of what we do. What we do, mission, vocation, service, is an advanced function of identity. You've heard me talk about this before. The reason why I have tears in my eyes, and I mentioned Metropolitan John Zizoulis earlier, is because the person that first taught me this many years ago was my professor, a Methodist Christian theologian who loved the Orthodox very much, and very brilliant psychologist and pastoral counselor, Dr. Homer Jernigan, who taught at Boston University for many, many years, was an advocate for civil rights long before it was popular, and was a man who really went beyond the fore in living with integrity. How we do our theology, how we use our lives reflects our real theology. And so Dr. Jernigan was the first person who taught me that vocation serves identity. It's an advanced function of identity, and one helps the other. And so that's really helpful for us as Orthodox today. And Professor Jernigan passed away over the weekend. It's my honor to pay a minute of remembrance of him, whom I hope he's interceding for us now in the Lord. How we express ourselves is always an advanced function of who we are in the presence of God. And so that is why the discipline of deeply listening to who we are, what are the circumstances, what is true for us in that moment in our response to the other, so that our response in the instance is a spontaneous response and not an impulse based on just partial integrity. One of the other dimensions of this prayer that, and I'm glad this is coming after mentioning Metropolitan John Zizoulis and Professor Homer Jernigan, now recently departed. My prayer is of blessed memory, now and always, is that Mother Teresa's prayer has two additional dimensions to it that we can maybe think about just for a few minutes. And that is, her words can be seen as a doxology. And what's a doxology? In Eastern Christian thinking, doxology is the highest form of prayer. Why? Because it is praise. It is, we are praising God authentically for who he is in the midst of all the created order that's bearing him glory, meaning all the angelic powers and all the saints in heaven. When we pray, when we speak in a doxological manner, we are in communion with all of heaven, that's singing God's praises and loving him and loving us at the same time. And so I can't help but see this prayer, especially the first part, since the second part that you're bringing in today, is new, but it actually makes it even more powerful, has a doxological component to it.
I had this discussion with my manager who said there are some people that work for money. At the time I couldn't understand her. She kept pressing on her opinion, trying to maybe even tell me that she doesn't come here for money. She just comes because she has been doing this 27 years, and whether or not she will still come. But as the years went on, after like 2-3 years that I'm still with the same company, sometimes I realize that I don't even think about how much am I making at this moment when I'm here. I just do my work, I interact with people and with the employees, and the money comes at the end and goes out. It's direct deposit, direct withdrawal. I don't even see it. But I still go to work.
So it's kind of like you're doing it for nothing, almost.
Yes, almost for nothing, and the money has moved into the back of my brain. It's still there, I think sometimes about it. But when I go to work, I don't think about the money, but I think about the people I have to be working with. God bless her. I had many arguments with her. I had many disagreements with her. I had fights with her. But now I kind of start approaching this a little bit different. What would your comment be on it?
I think it's delicious that you had the kind of relationship with her and the others where you work that, for sure, aren't you fortunate that you just happen to be paid to be doing this, because you're encountering one another as you provide a service, and yes, you need to earn the money, but it seems that different parts, even added up together, what you really get is far greater than the parts separate. And so I think that is part of the service, that is part of the love, the relationships. Now you're seeing the richness before you. And maybe it took a while to get used to the job because you are in management there, and it takes a while to sort of have all the responsibilities, align, and you become comfortable with all those tools you need to have with you as you're serving as a manager. But once you have that, now you're freer to engage others that you meet in a way that gives glory to God also. What you're saying is there's always ways of giving more love in a way that's true, in a way that's not a huge stretch, but a sweet and gentle stretch with the people that we know. And that's also a spiritual discipline, in a sweet, gentle stretch in how we offer our love to others in a way that is true to us, in the presence of God, and within the context we serve.
Thank you very much. I think we're running out of time. We'll go to the next line next time, which would be the fruit of service is peace. This is a very key point, I think. What kind of service gives us peace? Does it really give us peace? If we are serving, we sometimes suffer in the service. We don't get a peace. I don't know what is she talking about. We'll talk about this later. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear audience. And we'll meet you next time around the same conversation, same topic, which is Mother Teresa's prayer. I want to remind you one more time the prayer. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. And the fruit of service is peace. And in addition of this, she refers to God's help in every single line, that for every single one of those gifts to be fulfilled in life, we need God's presence and help for us. Thank you very much, and have a good day.